Welcome back. What do you do when the people you love most start packing your life into boxes while you're still living it? I'm 68 years old, and I spent 3 decades paying for a home that my children now treat like an inheritance waiting to happen. They cut down my roses and painted over my memories, waiting for me to fade away. But they forgot one thing. I built this foundation with my own 2 hands. Today, I'm taking it back. This isn't just a story about a house, it's a reckoning, and it starts right now. Stay until the end to see the revelation that changed everything. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more of this story.
There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by family. Not the loneliness of an empty room, not the loneliness of Saturday nights spent alone, but the loneliness of standing in a crowded kitchen while your daughter-in-law rearranges your dishes and realizing, slowly, like fog rolling in, that no one has asked you a single question in 3 days. The loneliness of being landscape, furniture, wallpaper in your own home. I know this loneliness well. My name is Kathleen Thomas. I'm 68 years old, and I'm sitting in the living room of the house I built 40 years ago, watching my family celebrate my grandson's birthday, wondering when exactly I became invisible. But that's not where this story begins. Let me tell you how it started. Let me tell you about the house that silence built, and how I tore it down. The first time I saw the house, it wasn't a house at all. It was a patch of overgrown land on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. Blackberry brambles thick as your wrist. Dandelions gone to seed. A for sale sign tilted at an angle, half buried in mud from the spring rains. Demetrio stood beside me, hands on his hips, squinting at the mess like he was trying to see through it to something better. "What do you think, Kathy?" he asked. I looked at the brambles, the mud, the sagging chain-link fence that marked the property line. "I think," I said slowly, "that it's going to take a lot of work." He grinned. "Good thing we've got time." We closed on the property in June. By August, we'd cleared the land. By October, the foundation was poured. Demetrio worked construction during the day, then came home and worked on our house until dark. I'd bring him coffee in a thermos, still hot from the morning pot, and we'd sit on what would eventually become the front porch, watching the sun set over what would eventually become our neighborhood. "This is ours," he said one evening, his calloused hand wrapped around mine. "No landlord, no rent. Ours." I remember the weight of that word. Ours. We moved in the week before Christmas, 1982. The house still smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. Half the rooms didn't have furniture yet. But we had a roof. We had walls. We had a door that locked from the inside, and a mortgage we'd spend the next 30 years paying off. Demetrio painted the living room wall himself, a soft cream color that caught the morning light just right. I can still see him up on the ladder, paint-speckled t-shirt, radio playing Creedence Clearwater Revival in the background. "This color's perfect," he called down to me. "Trust me, Kathy, you'll love it in the mornings." He was right. Every morning for the next 16 years, I'd sit in that living room with my coffee and watch the sunlight turn that cream-colored wall to gold. Out front, we planted climbing roses, 3 tiny bushes that looked like sticks in the dirt. The guy at the nursery said they'd take 5 years to really establish. "We've got time," Demetrio said again. And we did, or so we thought. Inside, I made the house a home the way my mother had taught me, slowly, carefully, with my own hands. I sewed curtains for the kitchen window, little white fabric with tiny blue flowers. Spent 3 evenings at the sewing machine getting the hems exactly right. When I hung them up, Demetrio whistled. "Look at that. We're fancy now." "They're just curtains," I said, but I couldn't stop smiling. They weren't just curtains. They were mine, made with my hands, in my house, for my family. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't living in someone else's space. I was building my own. Scott was born in the spring of 1985. 3 years later, Courtney arrived. And just like that, the house filled up with noise. Toy trucks on the living room floor. Crayons melted in the summer sun on the windowsill. The sound of small feet running down the hallway. Then Demetrio's deeper voice. "Walk, don't run." Every Sunday, I baked apple pie. My grandmother's recipe. Granny Smith apples just tart enough with cinnamon and a buttery crust that flaked apart in your hands. The whole house would smell like sugar and spice by noon. "Best pie in Oregon," Demetrio would say, scooping vanilla ice cream on top. "Best pie in the world," Scott would add, mouth full, 7 years old and already his father's son. Courtney would just nod, too busy eating to talk. Those Sunday afternoons stretched out like honey. After lunch, Demetrio would take Scott out to the backyard to play catch. I'd watch them from the kitchen window while I washed dishes, the arc of the baseball against the sky, Scott's small glove reaching up, Demetrio's patient voice. "Eye on the ball, buddy. Eye on the ball." Courtney would sit beside me at the sink, drying plates with a dish towel twice her size, telling me about her week in that breathless way children do, where everything is important and nothing can wait. In the evenings, we'd all crowd onto the leather couch in the living room. Demetrio had bought it secondhand from a guy at work, brown leather, worn soft in all the right places. It was too big for the room, really, but we loved it. The four of us would watch whatever was on TV. It didn't matter what. Game shows, sitcoms, the evening news. What mattered was the sound of the couch creaking under our combined weight, the warmth of Demetrio's arm around my shoulders, Scott's head against my side, half asleep by 8 o'clock, Courtney's small hand reaching for mine during commercials. "This is it," Demetrio whispered one night, so quiet only I could hear. "This is everything." I knew what he meant. Not the house, not the furniture, not even the children exactly, but this, the four of us together, safe, whole, everything we'd worked for. The roses out front grew taller every year. By 1990, they covered half the porch railing, blooming deep red every June. Demetrio would cut a few stems and bring them inside for the kitchen table. "Your roses, Kathy," he'd say, handing them to me with a grin. "Our roses," I'd correct him. But we both knew the truth. I was the one who watered them, pruned them, whispered to them like they could hear me. Maybe they could. They bloomed every year without fail. Demetrio died on a Tuesday. One moment he was sitting at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper, complaining about the Blazers' losing streak. The next moment his hand went to his chest. "Demetrio?" I said. He looked at me. His face had gone gray. "I think," he started. And then he was on the floor. The paramedics came. They worked on him for 20 minutes in our living room, right there on the cream-colored wall he'd painted. Scott stood in the hallway, 13 years old, holding his little sister's hand. Courtney was crying. I wasn't crying. I was standing very still, watching strangers pump my husband's chest, thinking, this isn't real. This is someone else's life. But it wasn't. He was 56 years old, a heart attack. Massive, they said. Nothing anyone could have done. The house felt different after that. Not empty, never empty, not with 2 children who still needed me, but bigger, like rooms had been added overnight that I didn't remember building. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and walk through the house in the dark, touching the walls. The kitchen counter where he used to leave his coffee mug. The spot on the couch where he always sat. The cream-colored wall he'd painted. I never repainted it. People told me I should. Fresh start, they said. New chapter, but I couldn't. That wall was the last thing Demetrio had made with his hands. The last piece of him I could still touch. So I left it. Cream-colored, catching the morning light, turning gold. I thought about selling the house. The mortgage was huge. I had 2 kids to raise. My job as a bookkeeper barely covered the bills. But every time I looked at the for sale signs in other people's yards, I'd think about Demetrio standing in the mud back in 1982 saying, "This is ours." So I kept it. I worked 2 jobs, bookkeeping during the day, alterations and sewing at night. I'd stay up until midnight hemming pants, taking in dresses, fixing zippers for neighbors who paid cash. The kids helped. Scott mowed lawns in the summer, Courtney babysat. And slowly, so slowly, we kept the house. Scott graduated high school in 2003, got a scholarship to Portland State. I cried at his graduation thinking, we did it, Demetrio. We did it. Courtney became a pharmacist in 2010. Smart as a whip, that girl. She could have done anything. Both my kids grew up strong, independent, kind. I was so proud I could barely breathe. In 2007, I made the last mortgage payment. 30 years, 360 months. Every single one paid on time. The house was mine. Fully, completely, legally mine. I celebrated by sitting on the front porch with a glass of wine, watching the climbing roses bloom. They were huge now, thick as my forearm, covering the entire porch in a canopy of red. We did it, I said out loud, to Demetrio, to the roses, to the house itself, and for the first time in 9 years, I felt something close to peace. Scott married Tiffany in 2010. She was nice enough, a little particular about things, the way the napkins should be folded, the correct way to load a dishwasher, but nice. She keeps me organized, Mom, Scott said, laughing. God knows I need it. I smiled. My boy was happy. That was enough. Courtney married Kyle in 2012. He was quieter than Tiffany, an engineer, thoughtful, maybe a little passive, but good-hearted. In 2011, my first grandson was born, Ethan, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, a shock of dark hair just like his father. I held him in the hospital and thought, this is what Demetrio and I built. Not just a house, a family. My lawyer suggested I set up a living trust in 2013. Estate planning, he said. Avoid probate. Make things easier for your kids when the time comes. I signed the papers without thinking much about it. The house would go to Scott and Courtney when I died. Equal shares. Simple. You're being smart, Mrs. Thomas, the lawyer said. Protecting your family's future. I remember nodding, signing my name, thinking, good. They'll never have to worry about losing this place the way I almost did. I didn't know then that a piece of paper could be a weapon. I didn't know that protecting the future could mean erasing the present. By 2015, the house was paid off. The garden had grown wild and beautiful. Scott and Courtney had their own lives, their own homes, their own families. And I thought, foolishly I know now, that the hardest part was over. I thought I'd survived the worst. I was wrong. Demetrio used to say that grief doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in waves, he'd tell me, talking about his own mother's death. First the big wave that knocks you down. Then smaller ones for years after, when you least expect them. He was right about the waves. What he didn't tell me, what he couldn't have known, is that some losses take so long to arrive, you don't recognize them as grief until you're drowning. The first year after Demetrio died, I moved through the house like a ghost. I'd wake up at 5:30 every morning, the time I'd always woken up to make his coffee, and lie there in the dark, listening to the silence where his breathing should have been. The bed felt enormous, a California king we had bought in 1990 when we finally had enough saved up. Room to stretch out, Demetrio had said, sprawling across it dramatically while the delivery guys laughed. Now I slept on one side. My side. His side stayed smooth, untouched, like a grave I made fresh every morning. Scott tried to be the man of the house. 13 years old, suddenly responsible for things no 13-year-old should worry about. Mom, I can mow the lawn, he'd say. I can fix the gutter. Baby, you can be 13, I'd tell him, pulling him close even though he was already taller than me. Let me worry about the house. But at night, after the kids were asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills, doing math that never quite added up. Mortgage, $847 a month. Utilities, $200. Groceries for 3 people, $400 if I was careful. My salary as a bookkeeper, $2,100 a month before taxes. The numbers didn't work. They just didn't work. I started taking in alterations the way my mother had taught me. Hemming pants, taking in dresses, fixing broken zippers. I charged $10 for hems, $15 for more complicated work. My sewing machine lived on the kitchen table. I'd work until midnight, sometimes later, the sound of the needle punching through fabric the only thing keeping me awake. Scott would come downstairs sometimes, unable to sleep. Mom, you should rest. I will, I'd say. Just one more. There was always one more. One more hem. One more payment. One more month we kept the house. Courtney was 10 when her father died. Too young to understand why he wasn't coming back. Old enough to know something fundamental had broken. She stopped talking for 3 months. Not completely. She'd answer direct questions. Do you want cereal or toast? Toast. But the breathless storytelling stopped. The constant chatter about her friends, her teacher, the book she was reading. Gone. I took her to a therapist. A kind woman named Dr. Harrison who had toys in her office and spoke in a voice like warm honey. After the 4th session, Dr. Harrison pulled me aside. She's not depressed, she said gently. She's protecting you. From what? From her sadness. She thinks if she's sad, you'll have too much to carry. I drove home with tears running down my face, pulled into our driveway, and sat in the car for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel. My 10-year-old daughter was trying to protect me. That night, I went into her room and lay down next to her in her small twin bed. "Baby," I whispered, "you're allowed to be sad." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "But if I'm sad, who takes care of you?" "Oh, Courtney." I held her while she cried. Finally, 3 months of tears coming out all at once. "I take care of me," I told her. "And you take care of you. And we both take care of each other. Okay?" She nodded against my shoulder. "Okay, Mama." Scott graduated high school in 2003. Top of his class. Full scholarship to Portland State for computer science. I sat in the bleachers at his graduation, watching him walk across the stage, and thought, "We made it, Demetrio. We actually made it." The hardest part was letting him go to college. Not emotionally. I was proud. So proud. But financially. "Mom, I can stay home," he said. "Commute. Save money." "No." I was firm about this. "You go. You live on campus. You get the full experience." "But, Scott," I took his face in my hands. "Your father and I built this house so you could have choices, so you could leave. Don't waste that gift by staying." He went, and the house got quieter. Courtney bloomed in high school. She'd always been smart, but after her father died, she became driven. Straight A's, honor society, early acceptance to Oregon State's pharmacy program. "I'm going to make good money, Mom," she told me when she got her acceptance letter. "Pharmacists make good money. I'll be able to help you." "Baby, you don't have to help me." "I want to." She had his eyes. Demetrio's eyes. Dark and determined. "Then help me by being happy," I said. In 2007, I made the final mortgage payment. I'd been paying extra every month for 5 years. $50 here, $100 there, whatever I could scrape together from alterations work. The bank sent me a letter. "Congratulations on paying off your home loan." I held that letter in my hands and cried. 30 years, 360 months, every single payment made on time, even the months I didn't know where the money would come from. The house was mine. I celebrated alone. The kids were both away at college. I poured myself a glass of wine, cheap Chardonnay from the grocery store, and sat on the front porch. The climbing roses Demetrio and I had planted in 1982 had taken over the entire porch. Thick vines, deep red blooms. They smelled like summer and memory. "We did it," I said out loud. The roses didn't answer, but I felt something shift in my chest. Something that had been clenched tight for 9 years finally loosening. Maybe, I thought, maybe the worst is over. Scott brought Tiffany home for Thanksgiving in 2009. "Mom, this is Tiffany. Tiffany, this is my mom." She was pretty, petite, well-dressed in a way I'd never quite managed. Everything matching, everything pressed, everything intentional. "Mrs. Thomas, it's so nice to meet you." She shook my hand instead of hugging me. "Scott's told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, smiling. "Of course." But her eyes were already moving past me, scanning the living room. I saw her gaze pause on the cream-colored wall, the worn leather couch, the curtains I'd sewn 27 years ago. Her smile didn't change, but something in her expression did. Just a flicker, a small tightening around her eyes. I told myself I was imagining it. They got married in 2010, a small ceremony at a hotel in downtown Portland. Tiffany's family paid for most of it. Her father was a dentist, her mother didn't work. Money wasn't something they worried about. At the reception, Tiffany's mother cornered me by the punch bowl. "So, Kathleen, you're retired now?" "Not quite. I still do bookkeeping part-time." "Oh." She looked surprised. "And you live alone? In that big house?" "It's not that big. 3 bedrooms. "Still," she sipped her champagne. "Must be a lot to maintain at your age." "At your age?" I was 62. "I manage," I said evenly. Courtney brought Kyle home in 2011. He was quieter than Tiffany. An engineer, thoughtful. He'd stand in doorways instead of entering rooms like he wasn't sure he was allowed. "Kyle, come sit down," I'd say. "You're family now." He'd smile, a quick nervous smile, and perch on the edge of the couch like he might need to leave quickly. But he was kind to Courtney. That's what mattered. They got married in 2012. Even smaller ceremony. Just immediate family. Courtney wore a simple dress from Macy's. "I don't need a big wedding, Mom," she said. "I'd rather save the money." She was always practical, my girl. Ethan was born in April 2011. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, a shock of dark hair. I held him in the hospital, and something in me cracked open. Not broke, opened, like a door I'd forgotten existed. "Hi, baby," I whispered. "I'm your grandma." He yawned, tiny and perfect, and gripped my finger with his whole hand. I thought about Demetrio, how much he would have loved this, how he'd always wanted to be a grandfather. "He's here," I told the baby softly. "Your grandpa. You can't see him, but he's here." Scott stood beside me, watching his son in my arms. "Thanks, Mom," he said quietly. "For what?" "For keeping the house. For holding everything together. For—" his voice broke. "For everything." I kissed my grandson's forehead and tried not to cry. "You would have done the same," I said, and I believed it. My lawyer called me in June. "Mrs. Thomas, given your age and the value of your property, we should discuss estate planning." I was 65, not old, but not young anymore. "What kind of planning?" "A living trust. It's simple. The house stays in your name while you're alive, but when you pass, it transfers directly to your children. No probate, no legal fees, no complications." It sounded smart, responsible. "And they can't touch it while I'm alive?" "Not without your permission. You remain the sole trustee. Full control." "Okay," I said. He said, "Let's do it." I signed the papers in his office. My name in blue ink on a dozen pages I only half understood. Scott and Courtney, equal beneficiaries. "You're being very wise," the lawyer said. "Protecting your family's future." I remember driving home feeling proud, like I'd done something good, something Demetrio would have approved of. I didn't know, couldn't have known, that I'd just handed them a map to my disappearance, that the word beneficiary would someday feel like burden, that protecting their future would mean erasing my present. By 2015, my life had settled into something resembling contentment. I was 67, retired from full-time bookkeeping but still doing occasional freelance work. The house was paid off. Both kids were married, settled, employed. I had a routine: coffee at 6, walk around the neighborhood at 7, gardening in the afternoon, dinner with Courtney and Kyle on Wednesdays, phone calls with Scott on Sundays. The roses out front were magnificent. 25 years old now, thick as tree trunks, blooming every June in an explosion of red. Neighbors would stop and compliment them. "How do you keep them so beautiful?" Mrs. Patricia Hughes asked one morning. "I just talk to them," I said, laughing. "And I never give up on them, even when they look dead." She smiled. Maybe that's the secret to everything. I thought about Demetrio less often now, not because I'd forgotten. You don't forget 30 years with someone, but because the pain had dulled to an ache. Manageable, familiar. I could sit on the porch without crying. I could look at the cream-colored wall without feeling like I'd been punched. I could wake up in the morning and think about the day ahead instead of the years behind. This, I thought, is what healing looks like. This is what surviving looks like. Scott called me one Sunday in late November. "Hey, Mom, got some news." "Good news?" "Yeah, I got a job offer. Better pay, better position. But it's in Beaverton, and our lease isn't up until June." "That's wonderful, baby. Congratulations." "Thanks, but, I was thinking. Would it be crazy if Tiffany and I stayed with you for a few months, just until we find a place in Beaverton?" I looked around my quiet house. 3 bedrooms. Just me. "Of course," I said immediately. "You're always welcome here." "You're the best, Mom. It'll just be a few months. I promise." "Take your time," I said. "This is your home, too." I meant it. God help me, I meant it. After we hung up, I walked through the house, mentally preparing. Scott and Tiffany could have the master bedroom. I'd move into the guest room. It would be nice, I thought, having people in the house again. I stood in the living room, looking at the cream-colored wall, the worn leather couch, the curtains with tiny blue flowers. All of it still here, still mine, still holding the memory of everything Demetrio and I had built. "Just a few months," I said out loud. The house was silent. But if I'd listened more carefully, if I'd paid attention to the tightness in my chest, the small voice whispering, "Be careful." I might have heard what the silence was trying to tell me. Some guests never leave. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. And sometimes the people you love most are the ones who make you disappear. They moved in on a Tuesday in January 2016. Just a few months, Scott had said in November. It was now January, the first crack in a promise. I didn't say anything. I told myself that 2 extra months didn't matter, that I was being petty to even notice. This is what I would learn over the next 4 years. The first time you silence yourself, it gets easier every time after. Tiffany arrived with a U-Haul, not a small one, the kind you rent for moving across town, the kind that holds an entire apartment's worth of furniture. "I didn't realize you were bringing so much," I said, watching Scott and Kyle unload box after box. "Oh, just the essentials," Tiffany said brightly. "We're selling most of our furniture. Doesn't make sense to pay for storage." She surveyed my living room with the same expression I'd seen at Thanksgiving 2009. That quick scan, that small tightening around her eyes. "This is going to be cozy," she said. Cozy. That word always sounds nice until you realize it means too small for both of us. The first thing she changed was the kitchen. "Mom, do you mind if I reorganize a bit?" Tiffany asked the second day. "Just to make room for our stuff?" "Of course not. Make yourself at home." Make yourself at home. Another phrase I'd learned to regret. I came back from my morning walk to find all my pots and pans in different cupboards. "I put the ones you use most down low," Tiffany explained. "The ones you never use, I moved to the top shelf. More efficient." I opened the cupboard where my everyday pots had lived for 30 years. Empty. "Where's my big stock pot?" "Top shelf. You probably won't need it much anyway, right? How often do you make soup for a crowd now?" "Every Sunday. I made soup every Sunday. But I didn't say that. I just nodded." "Thank you for organizing." "Of course," she smiled. "We're family." The second thing she changed was the living room. She didn't ask this time. I woke up one Saturday morning to find her and Scott rearranging furniture. The leather couch, the one Demetrio and I had bought in 1990, the one our family had gathered on for 25 years, was pushed against the wall at an odd angle. "What are you doing?" "Making the space flow better," Tiffany said, slightly out of breath. "This room is so dark. If we angle the couch this way, it opens up the whole area." "But that's where it's always been." "Exactly." She stood back, hands on hips, evaluating. "Sometimes change is good." Scott looked at me. For a moment I thought he'd say something, ask me, check if this was okay. Instead he said, "What do you think, Mom? Does it look better?" What I thought was, "I don't recognize my own living room anymore." What I said was, "It's fine." "Great!" Tiffany clapped her hands. "Next we should think about new curtains. Those blue floral ones are so—" She trailed off, searching for a word that wouldn't sound mean. "Dated," she finally said. "Dated. Not vintage. Not classic. Not these are 34 years old and I made them with my own hands. Dated. Like milk. Like meat. Like something that had gone bad and needed to be thrown away." The curtains disappeared on a Wednesday. I came home from the grocery store to find them gone, replaced with gray linen panels from Target. "Surprise!" Tiffany beamed. "I found these on clearance. Much more modern, don't you think?" My hands were full of grocery bags. I stood there, frozen, looking at the windows. "Where are my old curtains?" "Oh, I donated them. Someone else can get use out of them." "You donated them?" "Yeah, they were pretty worn out, Mom. The hem was coming undone on one side." Because I'd been meaning to fix it. Because that's what you do with things you love. You repair them. My throat felt tight. "I made those curtains." "I know." Tiffany's voice softened. "But that was what, 30 years ago? You don't need them anymore. These are so much easier to clean." Scott walked in from the garage. "What do you think of the new curtains, Scott?" Tiffany asked. He glanced at the windows. "They look good." He didn't look at me. I set the grocery bags on the counter, very carefully, and walked to my room. That night I cried for the first time since they'd moved in. Not because of curtains, not really, but because I'd spent 3 evenings in 1982 sewing those panels. Because Demetrio had hung them up and whistled and said, "Look at that. We're fancy now." Because they were mine. And now they were in some donation bin at Goodwill, waiting to be thrown away by someone who didn't know they mattered. Just a few months had become 6 months. I didn't mention it. Neither did Scott. Tiffany had stopped looking for apartments in Beaverton. At least she'd stopped mentioning it. Instead, she started talking about improvements. "This house has such good bones," she'd say, "but it needs updating." Updating. Another word that sounds positive until you realize it means erasing. Little Ethan turned 5 in April. He'd started calling me Grandma Kathy. Not Grandma, Grandma Kathy. "Tiffany thinks it's less confusing," Scott explained, "since he has 2 grandmas." "I'm his only Grandma Thomas," I said quietly. "I know, Mom, but it's just easier this way." Easier for whom, I didn't ask. Ethan loved to bake with me. On Sunday mornings, he'd climb up on a chair at the kitchen counter and we'd make cookies together. "Can you teach me Grandma's recipe?" he asked one morning. "Which one?" "The apple pie one. Daddy says it's the best in the world." My chest warmed. "Did he now?" "Yeah. He says when he was little you made it every Sunday." I pulled out my grandmother's recipe card. Yellowed with age, spotted with old flour stains, my mother's handwriting fading but still legible. "Okay, baby. First we need apples. Granny Smith apples, not Red Delicious." "Ethan, sweetie, come here, please," Tiffany's voice from the living room. He scrambled down from the chair. "What about the pie?" "We'll do it later," I said. We never did. Courtney called me one morning in August. "Mom, Kyle lost his job." My heart sank. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." "They're restructuring. He got severance, but—" She paused. "We're going to be tight for a while. What can I do to help?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Could we— Would it be crazy if we stayed with you? Just until Kyle finds something?" I looked around my house. Scott, Tiffany, and Ethan were already here. 18 months now. The master bedroom, half the garage, most of the kitchen cabinets. But Courtney was my daughter, and she'd never asked me for anything. "Of course," I said. "You're always welcome." "Thank you, Mom. It'll just be a few months." Just a few months. I'd heard that before. Courtney and Kyle arrived with their 2 children, Emma, 7, and Mason, 4. Suddenly, my 3-bedroom house held 9 people. Scott and Tiffany, master bedroom. Courtney and Kyle, second bedroom. The 4 grandchildren, third bedroom, bunk beds that Kyle assembled in one afternoon. Me, the fold-out couch in the living room. "Just temporarily, Mom," Courtney said, seeing my face, "until we get our feet under us." "It's fine," I said. It wasn't fine, but what was I supposed to say? No, you can't stay in the house I raised you in? No, even though you need help? I slept on a fold-out couch in my own living room and told myself it was temporary. Everything is temporary if you wait long enough. The leather couch disappeared on a Saturday. I came back from the grocery store, always the grocery store. I seem to spend half my life there now, feeding 9 people, to find it gone. In its place, a sleek gray sectional from IKEA. "Surprise!" Tiffany and Courtney stood there, smiling. "We went in together," Courtney explained. "The old couch was falling apart, and with all the kids—" "Where is it?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. Tiffany's smile faltered. "We sold it, on Craigslist. Got $200 for it, actually. That old leather is apparently vintage now." "You sold my couch." "Mom, it was literally falling apart," Courtney said gently. "The cushions were shot. The leather was cracking. I didn't ask you to replace it." Silence. Scott walked in from the backyard, read the room immediately. "What's going on?" "Your mother's upset that we replaced the old couch," Tiffany said. "Your mother. Not Mom, not even Kathleen. Your mother. Like I was a problem he needed to solve." Scott looked at me, then at the new couch, then back at me. "Mom, it's just a couch." It wasn't just a couch. It was the couch Demetrio had bought secondhand in 1990. The couch where we'd sit with Scott and Courtney on Sunday nights, watching TV, being a family. The couch where I'd nursed both my babies, where Demetrio and I had fallen asleep together more times than I could count. The leather had cracked because we'd lived on it. The cushions sagged because they'd held us. It was 33 years of life, worn soft and familiar, and they'd sold it to a stranger for $200. I went to my room, the living room corner where my fold-out bed lived, and sat down on the new IKEA sectional. It smelled like plastic and warehouse. The cushions were firm and unwelcoming. Nothing about it felt like home. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my fold-out bed, staring at the ceiling, and thought about a conversation I'd had with Mrs. Patricia Hughes earlier that week. "How's it going with everyone living there?" she'd asked. "Fine," I'd said automatically. "Must be nice. Full house." "Yes, very nice." She'd looked at me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide whether to believe me. "Kathy," she'd said finally, "you look tired." I'd laughed it off. But now, lying in the dark, I realized I was tired. Not sleepy tired. Soul tired. The kind of tired that comes from holding your breath for 18 months straight. My 69th birthday came and went. Nobody mentioned it. Not Scott, not Courtney, not Tiffany or Kyle. The grandchildren didn't know. They were too young to track adult birthdays. I woke up that morning, November 12th, and went through my usual routine. Made coffee, took my walk. Came back to a house full of people rushing through breakfast, getting kids ready for school, arguing about whose turn it was to do carpool. At 3 p.m., I went to the grocery store and bought myself a cupcake. Chocolate with vanilla frosting. I ate it in my car in the parking lot, alone, and sang happy birthday to myself very quietly. When I came home, Tiffany was cooking dinner. "Mom, can you set the table?" she called. I set the table. We ate spaghetti. The kids complained. Kyle scrolled through his phone. Scott and Tiffany discussed refinancing their car. Nobody said, "Happy birthday, Mom." Nobody said anything at all. That night, I found an old photo album in the garage. Pictures from the 1980s and 90s. There was one from my 40th birthday. Demetrio had thrown me a surprise party. Scott was 15, Courtney was 12. They'd made me a cake, lopsided and overfrosted, but made with love. In the photo, Demetrio's arm was around my shoulders. The kids were grinning. I was laughing at something someone had said. I looked happy. I looked seen. I closed the album and put it back in its box. I woke up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. The house was dark and quiet. I padded down the hallway in my slippers, trying not to wake anyone. That's when I heard voices from the kitchen. Low, careful. I stopped. "Can't keep living like this," Tiffany was saying. 9 people in a 3-bedroom house? It's insane. "I know," Scott's voice. "But what are we supposed to do? It's Mom's house." "Technically, it's in a trust, right?" Kyle this time. "For you and Courtney?" "Yeah, but she's still alive." Courtney sounded uncomfortable. "We can't just—" "I'm not saying anything bad," Tiffany interrupted. "I'm just saying she's almost 70. Has she thought about what happens when she can't maintain this place? When she needs help?" Silence. Then Scott. "She seems fine to me." "For now," Tiffany said. "But 10 years from now? 5 even? She's going to need assisted living or something, and then the house just sits here empty?" "What are you suggesting?" Courtney asked. "I'm suggesting," Tiffany said carefully, "that maybe we should talk to her about transferring the deed, adding your names while she's still competent to make that decision, for estate planning purposes." "That feels—" Courtney trailed off. "Smart," Tiffany finished. "It feels smart, and it would give us all security. You wouldn't have to worry about probate. We could use the equity for the kids' college funds. Everyone wins." "I don't know," Scott said slowly. "It feels like we're pushing her out." "We're not pushing her out, we're planning ahead. She'd still live here, obviously. It would just be official, legal, protected." I stood in the dark hallway, my hand pressed against the wall to keep from shaking. When she needs help, assisted living, transfer the deed, while she's still competent. They were planning my exit, in my own house, at 2 a.m., without me. I walked back to my fold-out bed very quietly. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I made apple pie on Sunday, my grandmother's recipe, the one I hadn't made in months. "What's the occasion?" Scott asked, smelling cinnamon. "No occasion, just felt like it." I set it on the counter to cool. Golden crust, steam rising. Perfect. Dinner came and went. Nobody touched the pie. "We're trying to cut back on sugar," Tiffany explained, "for the kids." "Oh," I looked at the pie. I didn't know. "It's okay, Mom. Maybe save it for later." Later never came. 3 days later, I found the pie in the trash. Half of it, anyway. Someone had cut a slice, taken 1 bite, and thrown the rest away. I stood there looking at my grandmother's recipe, the recipe that had survived the Depression, survived my mother's death, survived Demetrio's death, sitting in the garbage between coffee grounds and a dirty diaper. And I realized I'd stopped baking not because I'd gotten old, but because nobody wanted what I made anymore. Just a few months had become 2 years. I didn't mention it anymore. What was the point? My house was full of people, and I'd never felt more alone. I slept on a fold-out couch in the living room I'd furnished 36 years ago. I cooked in a kitchen I could barely recognize. I walked past walls that held other people's photos now, other people's art. The climbing roses outside were the only thing left that was still mine. I pruned them in January, the way I did every year, cutting back the dead growth, preparing them for spring. Mrs. Patricia watched me from her porch. "You still taking care of those old roses?" she called. "Always," I said. "Even when everything else changes," she said quietly. "Some things stay the same." I looked up at her. She was 73, widowed like me, living alone in the house she and her husband had bought in 1979. "Patricia," I said slowly, "do you ever feel like a guest in your own life?" She came down off her porch, crossed into my yard, looked at me for a long moment. "Oh, honey," she said finally, "you're not a guest. You're a ghost." The words hit me like cold water. A ghost, invisible, insubstantial, haunting a life that used to be mine. "What do I do?" I whispered. She squeezed my hand. "You remember," she said, "that ghosts can't be killed, because they're already dead." She meant it as comfort, I think, but all I heard was, "You're already dead." And standing there in my own front yard, holding pruning shears, looking at the house Demetrio and I built with our own hands 40 years ago. For the first time, I believed it. I wasn't dead. Not yet, but I was dying, one small piece at a time. Patricia was right about the ghost part, though. I moved through my own house like I was haunting it. Present, but unseen. There, but not really. The question I should have asked myself was, how long can a person live as a ghost before they forget they were ever alive? The answer, I learned, is exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days. Scott found me in the kitchen on a Saturday morning. "Mom, can we talk?" I was wiping down counters, a habit from when this was my kitchen, before it became a communal space I happened to have access to. "Of course." He sat down at the table. The morning light came through the window, through the gray linen curtains that had replaced mine, and made him look older than 34. "Tiffany and I have been thinking." My stomach tightened. Nothing good ever followed that sentence. "We've been here 3 years now," he continued, "and we're so grateful, Mom. Really. But we need to start thinking long-term." "Long term," I repeated. "About the house, about your future, about—" He rubbed his face. "Estate planning." There it was. The conversation from the 2 a.m. kitchen meeting, now happening in daylight to my face. "I have estate planning," I said carefully. "The living trust." "Right, but that's for after you pass away." He couldn't quite say the words. "We're thinking about now, about making things more secure for everyone." "How?" "If you added our names to the deed, mine and Courtney's, while you're while you're healthy and able to make decisions, it would just make everything easier, tax-wise, legally. And you'd still live here, obviously. Nothing would change for you." Nothing would change for me, except I'd no longer own my own house, except I'd need their permission for everything, except I'd officially become a guest in the home Demetrio and I built. "Let me think about it," I said. "Of course. No pressure. Just think about it." He stood up, squeezed my shoulder. "We're family, Mom. We're just trying to do what's best for everyone." After he left, I sat at that kitchen table for 20 minutes, staring at my hands. We're family. Why did that phrase, which used to mean we love each other, now feel like we own you? Tiffany started leaving things for me to find. Articles printed from the internet. Estate planning for seniors. Why waiting can cost your family thousands. The benefits of transferring property before age 70. How to protect your children's inheritance. She'd leave them on the kitchen counter, on my fold-out bed, on the bathroom sink. Never with a note, never with a conversation. Just there, waiting for me to see them. "Did you read that article I left you?" she'd ask casually. "About property transfer?" "I saw it." "And?" I'm still thinking. Her smile would tighten just slightly. Of course, take your time. But the message was clear. Time was running out. Courtney was gentler about it. Mom, she said one evening, just the two of us folding laundry. Have you thought more about what Scott asked? Some. I know it feels scary, giving up control, but you wouldn't be giving up anything, really. You'd still live here. You'd still make all the decisions. Then why add your names? She hesitated. Because legally, it protects everyone. And because... She folded one of Mason's tiny shirts. Because you're not getting younger, Mom. What if something happens to you and we can't access the house? What if you get sick and we need to sell it to pay for care? I'm 69, not 90. I know. That's why now is the perfect time. While you're healthy. While you can make clear decisions. While you're still competent. The phrase from the 2 a.m. conversation hung between us, unspoken. I'll think about it, I said again. But we both knew. The more they asked, the harder it became to say no. Kyle started talking about the yard. This back garden is a lot of work, he mentioned one Saturday. All these rose bushes, the vegetable patch, it's pretty overgrown. I maintain it, I said. Yeah, but it's a lot for one person, and with your knees... My knees were fine. What are you suggesting? Maybe we simplify, pave over some of it, put in a nice patio, low maintenance. The kids could have a play area. I looked at the garden Demetrio and I had planted in 1982, the climbing roses that were now 37 years old, the herb garden I'd tended every summer, the tomato plants I put in every May. I like the garden how it is. Sure, just a thought. But it wasn't just a thought. 2 weeks later, Tiffany brought it up. Then Courtney. Then Scott. Mom, it would be easier on you. Less to worry about. The garden became another thing they wanted to erase. Another piece of me they wanted to pave over. My 70th birthday came on a Tuesday. This time, they remembered. Tiffany baked a cake. Store-bought mix, too sweet. Nothing like the pies I used to make. Everyone sang. The grandchildren. Ethan, now 8, Emma 9, Mason 6, and little Sophie, Courtney's newest, just 2, clapped and cheered. Make a wish, Grandma Kathy, Ethan shouted. I closed my eyes and wished for something I couldn't name, something that felt like breathing used to feel. Before the house got so full, it squeezed all the air out. What did you wish for? Sophie asked. If I tell you, it won't come true, I said. Tiffany cut the cake. Everyone took a piece. I sat there, surrounded by family, and felt more alone than I had on my 69th birthday, eating a cupcake in my car. At least in the car, I'd been honestly alone. This was worse. This was being alone while people pretended to see you. Then COVID came. The world locked down in March 2020. Schools closed. Businesses closed. Everyone stayed home. My house, already full with 9 people, became a pressure cooker with no release valve. Mom, you need to be really careful, Scott said that first week. You're high risk, 70 years old. If you get COVID, I know, so maybe stay in your room as much as possible. We'll bring you meals. Stay in my room. Just until this blows over. We don't want to risk it. My room, the living room, the fold-out couch I'd slept on for 4 years now. For how long? A few weeks, probably. Maybe a month. A few weeks became 4 months. I ate meals alone, brought to me on a tray like I was in a hospital. I watched the family have dinner together in the kitchen. I could hear their laughter, their conversations, while I sat in my corner, invisible behind a closed door. It's for your safety, Tiffany said whenever I emerged for something. My safety felt a lot like solitary confinement. Zoom calls happened constantly, everyone working from home, taking calls in different corners of the house. I tried to be quiet, to not interrupt, to not exist too loudly. One afternoon, I heard Tiffany on a call in the kitchen. I was just walking by. I lived there. I had to walk through sometimes when I heard, I know, Mom, it's been hard. 4 years now. Pause. No, she hasn't agreed to transfer the deed yet. We keep bringing it up, but... Pause. I don't know. She's stubborn. And honestly, I think she doesn't understand how much easier it would make everything. For her, too. Pause. Well, we can't force her, but we're going to keep trying. Gently. We just need to make her see it's the right choice. I stood outside the kitchen door, frozen. Make her see. Not ask, not discuss. Make me see. Like I was a child who didn't understand what was good for her. Like my 40 years of paying mortgages, maintaining this house, surviving loss. None of that meant I could be trusted to make my own decisions. Mom, we need to talk about the backyard. Kyle this time. Scott and Courtney standing behind him like reinforcements. What about it? The rose bushes are getting out of control. They're overgrown, they're taking over the fence, and honestly, they're becoming a hazard. A hazard. The thorns. With the kids running around, the kids don't go near the roses. But they could, and with COVID, we can't exactly have landscapers over to deal with them. I looked at Scott. What do you think? He wouldn't meet my eyes. Kyle's probably right, Mom. They are pretty overgrown. So what are you suggesting? We pull them out, Kyle said simply. Start fresh. Maybe put in some simple shrubs, native plants, easier to maintain. The climbing roses Demetrio and I had planted in 1982. The roses that had outlived him by 22 years. The roses that were the last living thing connecting me to the man who'd built this house with his bare hands. No, I said. Mom, no, my voice was shaking. You can't. We're just trying to help. Those roses stay. Scott stepped forward. Mom, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I shouted. Everyone stopped. I never shouted. I never raised my voice. I was quiet, accommodating, reasonable Kathleen who slept on a fold-out couch and ate meals alone and watched her life disappear piece by piece without complaint. But not this. Not the roses. Those roses stay, I said again, quieter now but no less firm. That's final. They backed off. For a week. I woke up on a Saturday to the sound of a chainsaw. I ran outside in my bathrobe. Kyle was cutting down the rose bushes. Scott was hauling the branches to a pile in the driveway. The climbing roses, 38 years old, thick as my arm, blooming red every June since 1982, were being destroyed. What are you doing? I screamed. Kyle turned off the chainsaw. Mom, we talked about this, Scott started. I said no. You're being unreasonable, Tiffany said from the porch. These needed to come out. They were dangerous. I planted those with my husband. Your husband died 22 years ago, Tiffany said. Not cruelly, matter-of-factly. It's time to let go. I stood there in my bathrobe, looking at the stumps where my roses had been. 38 years. Gone. Cut down while I slept. You had no right, I whispered. Mom, we're sorry you're upset, Scott said. But this is for the best. You'll see. Get out. What? Get out of my sight. I walked back inside, to my corner, my fold-out bed, my tiny piece of the house I no longer recognized. I didn't cry. I was beyond crying. I sat there, staring at the gray sectional couch that had replaced the leather one, in the living room with gray curtains instead of blue flowers, and I thought, there's nothing left. We're repainting the living room. Tiffany announced it at breakfast like she was discussing the weather. What color? I asked automatically. A nice charcoal gray. Very modern. The cream color is so... She searched for the word. I knew the word before she said it. Dated, she finished. The cream-colored wall. The one Demetrio had painted in 1982. The one I'd refused to repaint for 38 years. The last piece of him I could touch. No, I said. Mom, it's just paint, Scott said. No. You can't keep everything the same forever, Courtney added. The house needs updating. Please, I whispered. Not that wall. Tiffany looked at me like I was a crazy person. It's a wall, Mom. Paint. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything. That's the problem, she said quietly. You're holding on to everything. You can't move forward because you're stuck in the past. They painted it anyway. On a Monday when I was at the doctor's office, I came home to find the living room smelling like fresh paint, the same smell from 1982, but wrong now, all wrong, and the cream-colored wall covered in dark charcoal gray. I stood there, hand pressed against the wall that no longer held Demetrio's brushstrokes, and something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet snap, like a bone that's been cracking for years finally giving way. Ethan found me in the kitchen one afternoon, 9 years old now, tall for his age, looking more like his father every day. Grandma Kathy, can we bake cookies? My heart lifted for the first time in months. Of course, baby. I pulled out my old recipe cards, the ones I hadn't used since the apple pie ended up in the trash. We'll make chocolate chip, your dad's favorite when he was your age. We mixed the dough, Ethan chattering about school, his friends, a video game he was playing, just like old times. I put the first batch in the oven. The smell filled the kitchen. Butter, vanilla, chocolate, homemade, real. When they came out, golden and perfect, I put 3 on a plate for Ethan. He took a bite, made a face. What's wrong? They taste weird. My stomach sank. Weird how? I don't know. Not like normal cookies. These are homemade, sweetheart, from scratch. Yeah, but he put the cookie down. I like the Chips Ahoy ones better. Sorry, Grandma. He said it kindly. He wasn't trying to hurt me, but that made it worse somehow. My grandson, the child I'd held at 2 days old, who'd begged me to teach him to bake, who'd loved my apple pie, preferred factory-made cookies to mine, because he'd grown up in a house where everything I made was wrong, where dated meant bad, where homemade meant weird, where I meant nothing. Tiffany came into the kitchen, saw the cookies. Oh, Ethan, don't fill up on those. We're having dinner soon. She didn't say they looked good. She didn't ask for the recipe. She just made them invisible. Made me invisible. The way she'd been doing for 4 years, 11 months, and 23 days. I was 71 years old. I slept on a fold-out couch in a living room that didn't look like my living room anymore. I cooked in a kitchen where nothing was where I'd put it. I looked out windows with curtains I didn't recognize. I walked through a house where every surface held someone else's belongings, someone else's choices, someone else's life. The roses were gone. The wall was gray. My recipes were weird. My furniture was sold. My birthday was forgotten more years than it was remembered. And I was effectively homeless in my own home. I thought about what Patricia had said 2 years ago. You're not a guest. You're a ghost. She was wrong. Ghosts at least haunted places they'd loved. I didn't love this place anymore. I didn't recognize it. That night, lying on my fold-out bed, staring at the dark gray wall where cream used to be, I made a decision. Not a big one. Not dramatic. Just this. Tomorrow morning, I would call my lawyer. Because Patricia was right about one thing. Ghosts can't be killed. But they can wake up. And when they do, when they finally remember they were once alive, the haunting is over, and the reckoning begins. I called my lawyer on a Tuesday morning in February 2021. His name was Richard Chen. He'd handled the Living Trust back in 2013. A good man, patient, thorough. Mrs. Thomas, he said when his secretary put me through. It's been a while. What can I do for you? I need to know something, I said. The Living Trust I set up. Can they force me out of my house? Silence. Then, who's they? My children. Are they asking you to leave? Not in those words, but they want me to add their names to the deed. And they've been... I paused. How to explain 4 years of erasure in one sentence? They've been making decisions about my house without asking me. What kind of decisions? Painting walls? Removing my garden? Throwing away my belongings? And now they want legal ownership while I'm still alive. Another pause. Longer this time. Mrs. Thomas, I need to ask you something directly. Do you feel safe in your home? The question stopped me cold. Did I feel safe? Physically, yes. No one had hurt me. No one had threatened me. But safe? No, I whispered. I don't. Okay, Richard said gently. Then here's what we're going to do. By the end of that call, I had a plan. The trust was solid. They couldn't touch it without my signature. But Richard suggested something else. Protective documentation, a formal letter establishing boundaries, and if necessary, a legal notice requiring them to find alternative housing. How long can I give them? I asked. 60 days is standard for family situations. Gives them time to find a place without being cruel. 60 days. 2 months to undo 4 years. Let's do it, I said. It happened on a Wednesday. I woke up early, 5:30 a.m. like I had every morning for 40 years, and made coffee. Real coffee, from my old machine that I'd retrieved from the back of the cupboard where it had been upgraded away. The house was quiet. Everyone still asleep. I sat on the porch, my porch, The one Demetrio and I had sat on 1,000 evenings and watched the sun come up over the stumps where my roses used to be. And I thought, today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. At 9 a.m., I went to the garage. I'd been avoiding it for months. It had become a dumping ground for things that needed to go, meaning things that were mine, things that Tiffany and Courtney decided I didn't need anymore. I found them in the corner, 3 large boxes labeled Donate. I opened the first one. Inside, my wedding album, the quilt my mother had made me, Demetrio's toolbox, photo albums from the 1980s, my sewing machine. The second box, kitchen items I'd used for decades, the cast iron skillet I'd seasoned over 20 years, my grandmother's mixing bowls, recipe cards in my mother's handwriting. The third box, clothes, books, a jewelry box Demetrio had given me for our 10th anniversary. My entire life packed up like garbage, ready to be given away to strangers. I stood there, hands shaking, and something inside me finally, fully, completely broke open. Not broke apart, broke open, like a door I'd been holding shut for 4 years, 11 months, and 6 days suddenly flying wide. I walked back into the house. Tiffany was in the kitchen, making breakfast. Courtney was helping the kids get ready for virtual school. Scott was on a work call in the bedroom. I stood in the center of the living room, my living room, the one with the gray walls and the IKEA couch and the Target curtains, and I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I need everyone in here, now." Tiffany looked up, startled. "What's wrong?" "Everyone, now." My voice didn't shake. For the first time in years, my voice was steady as stone. They gathered slowly. Tiffany wiping her hands on a towel. Courtney sending the kids to their room. Kyle emerging from the garage. Scott ending his call and coming out, concerned. "Mom, what's going on?" I looked at each of them. These people I loved. These people who had slowly, piece by piece, erased me from my own life. "I went into the garage this morning," I said. Tiffany's face flickered, just slightly. "I found 3 boxes labeled Donate," I continued. "Inside those boxes, I found my wedding album, my mother's quilt, Demetrio's tools, my sewing machine, my grandmother's mixing bowls." "Mom, those were just old things you weren't using," Courtney started. "You were throwing away my life," I said quietly. Without asking, without permission, like it was garbage. "We were trying to help you declutter," Tiffany said. "You have so much stuff." "It's not stuff. It's my history. It's who I am." Scott stepped forward. "Mom, I think you're overreacting." "No!" My voice cut through the room. "I'm not overreacting. I'm finally reacting." Silence. "For 4 years," I said slowly, "I have watched you change this house. My curtains, my furniture, my garden, my walls. I have slept on a fold-out couch while you lived in my bedroom. I have eaten meals alone while you had family dinners without me. I have been erased piece by piece in my own home." "Mom, that's not fair," Courtney said, her voice breaking. "We were just trying to help. By destroying my roses while I slept?" I looked at Kyle. "By painting over the last wall my husband touched?" I looked at Tiffany. "By telling my grandson my cookies are weird?" Tiffany flushed. "I never said that." "You didn't have to. You taught it." I took a breath. "I heard you," I said to Tiffany, "in June 2020, on the phone with your mother, talking about how stubborn I was, how you needed to make me see that transferring the deed was the right choice." Her face went pale. "And I heard you," I said to all of them, in December 2017, at 2 a.m. in the kitchen, planning my exit, talking about assisted living, about using the equity in my house for college funds, about estate planning." Scott's mouth opened, closed. "While I stood in the hallway," I continued, listening to my own children discuss when I'd be too incompetent to make my own decisions, no one spoke. "This is my house," I said clearly. "Not technically, not legally someday. Mine, now. I paid for it. I maintained it. I survived in it. And I will not be erased from it." Tiffany's eyes were wet. "We never meant to make you feel, but you did, and intention doesn't erase damage." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded envelope, the one Richard Chen had prepared for me. "What is that?" Scott asked, his voice hoarse. A 60-day notice, I said. For all of you to find another place to live. The room exploded. Mom, you can't be serious. Where are we supposed to go? What about the kids? You can't just kick us out. I held up my hand. The room went quiet. I can, I said gently. And I am. Courtney's face crumpled. Mom, please. We have nowhere to go. Kyle still hasn't found steady work. Then you'll find something in 60 days. But the kids, Ethan, Emma, Mason, Sophie. Tiffany's voice was desperate now. You're their grandmother. I know. My heart was breaking, but my voice stayed steady. And I will always be their grandmother. But I will not be invisible anymore. I will not watch you pack up my life in boxes while I'm still living it. Scott stood very still. Is this really what you want? What I want, I said, looking directly at him, is to be seen. What I want is for my son to defend me instead of staying silent while his wife calls me stubborn. What I want is to wake up in my own bed, in my own house, and feel like I'm allowed to exist in it. His eyes filled with tears. I never meant, I know you didn't, but you did it anyway. I pulled out a second envelope. I also went back to my lawyer, I said. The living trust stays in place, but I've added a provision. When I die, the house will be split equally between you, but you can't sell it for 10 years. What? Tiffany looked stunned. Why? Because this house is not an investment. It's a home. It's where I raised my children, where I buried my grief, where I built my life. I looked at each of them. And I want you to remember what it means to care for something. Not just use it until it's inconvenient, then throw it away. Scott's voice was barely a whisper. You think that's what we did to you, isn't it? The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. Finally, Kyle spoke. Mrs. Thomas, I'm sorry, we should have asked. About the roses, about everything. Yes, I said simply. You should have. Courtney was crying now. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I know you didn't, and that's the problem. You stopped seeing me. Over the next hour, there were tears, apologies, anger, confusion. But by the end, they understood. I meant it. 60 days. They had 60 days to leave. The first week was silent. They moved through the house like ghosts. Fitting, since I'd been one for 4 years. Now the haunting was reversed. Scott and Tiffany looked at apartments online. Courtney and Kyle made phone calls. The children sensed something was wrong but didn't understand what. And I started reclaiming. Day 1, I moved back into the master bedroom. Scott and Tiffany had to take the second bedroom. The room I'd given them freely 4 years ago was mine again. Tiffany's face when she saw me moving my clothes back in, I'll never forget it. Shock, hurt, anger. But she didn't say anything. Because what could she say? It was my bedroom. Day 5, I found Dimitrio's box in the garage. The one with his old letters, his tools, the photographs I'd packed away years ago because seeing them hurt too much. Inside, I found something I'd forgotten, an envelope with my name on it, in his handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter, Kathy. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't get more time. I'm sorry I won't see the kids grow up. I'm sorry for everything I'll miss, but I need you to promise me something. Don't let anyone make you small. You're the strongest person I know. You survived losing your mother at 16. You survived putting yourself through college. You survived building this house from nothing. You'll survive losing me, too. I know you will. But here's what I'm worried about. I'm worried you'll shrink, that you'll make yourself smaller to fit into other people's expectations, that you'll give and give until there's nothing left. Don't. This house is yours. Your life is yours. Your voice is yours. Anyone who can't see your worth doesn't deserve your sacrifice. Be big, Kathy. Take up space. Be loud. Be stubborn. Be everything you are without apology. The world needs women who refuse to disappear. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'm watching. Always, Dimitrio, I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, put it in my pocket, and went downstairs. Scott was in the living room, packing books into boxes. Scott, I said, can we talk? We sat on the gray IKEA couch, the one that had replaced his father's leather one. Do you remember what you said when your father died? I asked. He looked at me, confused. No. You said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of you." His eyes filled. I meant it. I know, but somewhere along the way, take care of me became take over for me. I never meant to. I know, but it happened. I pulled out Demetrio's letter. Your father wrote me this before he died. I found it today. I handed it to him. He read it slowly, and when he finished, he was crying. He'd be so disappointed in me, Scott whispered. No, I said gently. He'd be sad, but not disappointed, because you can still change. How? By seeing me, really seeing me, not as someone to manage or fix or plan for, but as your mother, as a person, as someone who's still here, still living, still deserving of a voice in her own life. He cried harder than I'd seen him cry since he was 13, standing in the hospital hallway the night his father died. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I held him. My boy. My son. I forgive you, I said. But I won't forget. And I won't go back to being invisible. I don't want you to, he said. I want you to be you, big and loud and stubborn, like Dad said. Week 2, Tiffany knocked on my bedroom door. Can I come in? I was folding laundry, my laundry, in my room. Of course. She sat on the edge of the bed, wouldn't look at me. I'm sorry, she said finally, about the curtains, the couch, the roses, all of it. Why did you do it? She was quiet for a long time. Because I felt like nothing was mine, like we were just living in someone else's museum. And I wanted to make it ours. I wanted to feel like I had control over something. So you took control of my things. Yeah. She looked up, tears streaming. It was wrong. I see that now. But at the time, it just felt like updates, like improvements. I didn't think about what we were taking from you. You took my history, I said quietly. You took my husband's memory. You took my identity. I know, her voice broke. And I can't give them back. But I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. I believed her, but I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. Thank you for apologizing, I said instead. It was enough. Week 4, the children started asking questions. Grandma, why are we moving? Emma asked one morning. Because Grandma needs her house back, I said honestly. But why can't we all live together? Because sometimes people need space to be themselves, and I haven't had space in a very long time. Will we still see you? Every week, I promised. You can come visit. We'll bake cookies. We'll read stories. Nothing changes except where you sleep. Okay, she said, and hugged me. Children, I thought, understand boundaries better than adults do. Week 7, Ethan found me in the kitchen. Grandma Kathy? Yes, baby? I'm sorry I said your cookies were weird. My heart squeezed. You remember that? Yeah, Mom said I hurt your feelings. I didn't mean to. I knelt down to his level. I know you didn't, and you're forgiven. Can we make cookies together before we leave? Absolutely. That afternoon, we made chocolate chip cookies from scratch. Real butter, real vanilla, real chocolate chips. When they came out of the oven, he took a bite and smiled. These are really good, Grandma. Better than Chips Ahoy? He grinned. Way better. Week 8, moving day. Scott and Tiffany had found a small rental house in Beaverton. Courtney and Kyle had found a 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. I stood on the porch, watching them load boxes into trucks. Scott came over, hugged me. I love you, Mom. I love you too. Will you forgive me? I already have, I said. But forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's deciding the past won't define the future. That's fair. Tiffany hugged me too, stiff at first, then genuine. Thank you, she whispered, for teaching me what boundaries look like. Courtney cried on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it. I know, baby, I know. When they drove away, the house was silent, but not empty. For the first time in 4 years, 11 months and 28 days, the silence felt like peace. 6 months later, September 2021, I woke up in my own bed, the master bedroom, windows open, cool fall air drifting in. The smell was different now, Not the smell of 9 people in constant chaos. Just me. Just coffee brewing downstairs. Just quiet. I got up, made coffee in my old machine, and sat on the porch. Where the rose bushes used to be, I'd planted new ones. Young, small, not the same as Demetrio's roses, but mine. They hadn't bloomed yet. Wouldn't for another year at least. But they were alive, growing, waiting. Inside, I'd repainted the living room wall. Not cream, not gray, a soft yellow, like sunlight, like morning, like new beginnings. I'd sewn new curtains for the kitchen, not the blue flowers from 1982. Something different, green linen with white trim. My hands still remembered how. On Sundays, I baked apple pie, my grandmother's recipe. Not for anyone else, for me. And sometimes I'd bring one to Patricia next door, and we'd eat it together on her porch, talking about everything and nothing. The leather couch was gone forever. I'd accepted that, but I'd bought a new one, not from IKEA, a real one, deep blue velvet, comfortable, mine. And on Sunday afternoons, when Ethan came to visit, we'd sit on it together and watch cartoons. "This couch is really nice, Grandma," he said once. "Thank you, baby. It feels like you." I didn't know what that meant exactly, but it felt true. Scott called every week now, really called. Not just logistics and schedules, but actual conversations. "How are you, Mom?" "Good. Really good." "We still on for dinner Wednesday?" "Absolutely." Tiffany sent me flowers on my 72nd birthday, with a card that said, "Thank you for teaching me that love includes boundaries." I put them in a vase on the kitchen table and cried. Good tears this time. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun set, Patricia came over. "You look different," she said. "How so?" "Solid, like you're here again." I thought about that, about being a ghost for 4 years, about coming back to myself. "I am here," I said. Finally. I don't know when exactly I came back to myself. Maybe it was the morning I called the lawyer. Maybe it was the day I moved back into my bedroom. Maybe it was the moment I read Demetrio's letter and remembered who I used to be. Or maybe it was just this. One morning I woke up, made coffee, and it tasted right again. Not perfect, not like it used to be, but right, real, mine. The house is quieter now, emptier, but it's mine. And every morning when I wake up, I can still feel Demetrio here. Not in the walls anymore, those are new now, but in the foundation. In the bones of this place we built together. I can still hear the birds I learned the names of 40 years ago. I can still smell the roses, even though they're different roses now. I can still feel the weight of a life lived fully. Not perfectly, not easily, but mine. And that, I've learned, is enough. If you're listening to this and you feel invisible in your own life, I want you to know something. It's not selfish to take up space. It's not cruel to set boundaries. It's not mean to say, "This is mine," because the people who truly love you won't need you to disappear to make room for them. They'll make room for you too. And if they can't, then maybe it's time to build a new table. One where you're not the ghost. One where you're not the guest. One where you sit at the head in your own house and everyone knows, without question, that you belong there. I'm 72 years old now. I sleep in my own bed. I cook in my own kitchen. I sit on my own couch. And when my grandchildren visit, they know this is Grandma's house. Not a museum, not a hotel. Home. My home. The house that silence built can be rebuilt with your voice, but you have to be willing to speak, even when your voice shakes, even when people you love don't want to hear it, even when it cost you everything you thought you couldn't live without. Because here's what I learned. You can survive losing a house. You can survive losing belongings. You can even survive losing people, but you cannot survive losing yourself. So speak, stand up, take up space. You're not too old to start over. You're not too late to reclaim yourself. And you're never, ever too much. Remember, the only person who needs to believe you deserve to be seen is you. And once you believe it, really believe it, no one can make you invisible again. This is Kathleen Thomas. Still here, still standing, still mine.
Welcome back. What do you do when the people you love most start packing your life into boxes while you're still living it? I'm 68 years old, and I spent 3 decades paying for a home that my children now treat like an inheritance waiting to happen. They cut down my roses and painted over my memories, waiting for me to fade away. But they forgot one thing. I built this foundation with my own 2 hands. Today, I'm taking it back. This isn't just a story about a house, it's a reckoning, and it starts right now. Stay until the end to see the revelation that changed everything. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more of this story.